World before sense. In 1950, the Palomar Sky Survey photographed those coordinates and registered standard stellar luminosity, a data point that would spend 69 years locked inside a restricted archive before the 2019 VASCO algorithm forced it into the open. No edge distortion. No gravitational shadow. No anomaly of any kind, just a star, present, catalogued, indexed. The official position, published after the VASCO algorithm processed 600 million coordinate cross-references in 2019, classified the discrepancy as photographic emulsion decay, chemical artifacts on aging glass plates mimicking stellar sources that never existed. That was the conclusion submitted. Gone. The VASCO data does not support that conclusion. Emulsion artifacts do not produce measurable parallax displacement, but 3 of the affected coordinates showed exactly that in 1950, registered across independent observatory plates separated by thousands of kilometers. You cannot fake gravitational curvature on glass. The 2019 digital return on those same coordinates came back neutral pixel. Not underexposed. Not shifted. The astrophysics of stellar decay requires residual infrared for a minimum of 300 years post-collapse. Wise and Spitzer found none. No infrared. No debris arc. No thermodynamic trace of a body that once curved local spacetime. What instrument failure produces a result physically cleaner than the object it replaced? The 1950 plate shows a star. The 2019 frame shows a void so sterile it registers below the thermal noise floor of deep space. This is not a corrupted file. This is a coordinate where something was present and is no longer, and the erasure left no mechanical evidence of the process that produced it. The deletion did not generate a signature because the deletion is the signature. The remaining diagnostic files are locked behind an upgraded access tier. Subscribe before this archive rotates. What follows, the geometry of the absences and the coordinate distribution the VASCO team did not publish, requires verified clearance. One validation is all the system needs to keep your access open. Stellar decay follows a fixed thermodynamic sequence catalogued across 10,000 documented collapse events. A star with sufficient mass to register parallax displacement does not exit the visible spectrum without generating infrared residual, the photon output of a cooling body radiating across a minimum window of 3 centuries. That is the measured output of every stellar death on record. VASCO case file 0091, standard luminosity in 1950, neutral pixel in 2019. No curve. No gradient. No thermodynamic exit. Not dimmed. Removed. The decay curve does not exist because the process did not use one. The artifact hypothesis collapses under its own requirement. To accept it, the void would need to have produced a measurable gravitational effect before the star existed. Parallax is a geometric measurement derived from physical position across observatories separated by millions of kilometers of orbital distance. It cannot be chemically mimicked on glass. System failure does not manufacture geometry. The math does not close. No known stellar model permits this outcome. What physical process erases a body of stellar mass without generating a single photon of thermal discharge? The void registered nothing, no thermal displacement, no pressure differential, no corrupted data logged from the photon field the star was actively broadcasting 69 years prior, no terminal entry, no closed frequency, no exit record of any kind. The emission stopped at a fixed coordinate and did not resume at any adjacent frequency. Every known stellar exit mechanism produces evidence across at least one wavelength. These coordinates produced evidence across 0. That is not a detection gap. That is a physical result. The VASCO algorithm flagged 142 coordinates. Distributed across non-contiguous sectors, separated by angular distances ruling out any shared local event, no gamma-ray burst, no gravitational wave corridor connects them. Each absence is geometrically isolated. And yet every single one returned the same result: standard luminosity pre-1950, neutral return post-2019, zero infrared residual, zero debris signature. 142 coordinates. Same signature. Zero deviation. That is not noise. That is control. No instrument malfunction. No error signature. The Gaia DR2 catalog was cross-validated against the digitized sky survey using independent processing pipelines on separate computational architectures. Structural failure in detection equipment introduces noise, it does not produce clean, thermodynamically sterile voids at cataloged stellar coordinates with valid 1950 parallax signatures. The VASCO dataset does not show instrument degradation. It shows a pattern that instrument degradation physically cannot produce. Why does a dataset of 600 million coordinates return a subset sharing a standard deviation of effectively zero across three independent physical measurements? Each confirmed absence, pre-disappearance luminosity within normal parameters, post-disappearance pixel return below cosmic background thermal noise, zero gravitational residual. Not one of the 142 deviates from this profile. Random deletion does not produce uniform signatures. Mechanical repetition does. The forensic log on this pattern requires a confirmed read to remain active, like this transmission, to keep this file indexed before it's flagged for deletion. The VASCO primary publication documented the absences. What it did not publish was the angular distribution analysis completed internally before submission. When the 142 confirmed coordinates are plotted against galactic cartography, they do not scatter, they cluster along a diagonal corridor approximately 40 degrees wide, oriented along a consistent bearing relative to the galactic plane. The published paper describes the absences as distributed across the sky. The angular clustering was not included in the public filing. The dataset contains a vector. The publication removed it. Calculated. Not scattered. The deletion corridor is not expanding in all directions, it advances along a fixed bearing, with absence density increasing toward one end. The pattern is not radial. It is directional. A physical drive containing the unpublished angular mapping was pulled from the active research server and transferred to offline storage 4 months before the paper was submitted. The screen went dark mid-transfer. The void the VASCO data describes has a front edge, and the front edge is not behind us. What natural extinction mechanism produces a directional corridor advancing along a fixed galactic bearing rather than propagating spherically from a point of origin? Supernovae expand radially. Gamma-ray bursts sterilize in both directions simultaneously. The VASCO corridor advances in one direction only, density thinning at the trailing edge, concentrating at the leading edge. That is the mechanical signature of a process with momentum. The next question is not what is causing this. The next question is what sits directly ahead of that leading edge. The orbital geometry places the leading edge within calculable distance of our galactic arms boundary. Direction confirmed. The Orion arm spans approximately 3,500 light-years in width, containing the solar system roughly 26,000 light-years from the galactic core. The VASCO deletion corridor's bearing, extended through galactic cartography beyond the confirmed cluster, intersects the Orion arm's trailing boundary within a margin of less than 400 light-years positional uncertainty. Whatever process produces thermodynamically sterile voids at stellar coordinates does not require contact with our position to begin affecting local gravitational architecture. Gravitational perturbation propagates ahead of the source. The leading edge is already inside the arm's gravitational perimeter. If the boundary mass is already compromised, the orbital constants we use are derived from a neighborhood that no longer exists at that mass. Stars at the Orion Arms trailing boundary do not need to vanish for the corridor to register physical effects on local orbital mechanics. Gravitational architecture at interstellar scale is a continuous medium. A perturbation at 400 light-years propagates inward through the stellar density gradient at a rate determined by the mass differential between source and local medium. The outer boundary the Orion Arm's orbital mechanics depend on is registering an orbital breach from a direction the arm has no structural resistance to absorb. Does the heliosphere maintain coherence against a gravitational perturbation propagating through a medium where 142 stellar masses have been reduced to sterile voids without thermodynamic residue? The Solar System's heliospheric boundary is 3 times thinner on the side facing the Orion Arm's trailing edge, the exact direction the VASCO corridor advances from. Share this transmission before the institutional blackout reaches your sector. The coordinate data linking the deletion corridor to the Orion Arms trailing boundary is being suppressed from the public archive. The gravitational coherence of a stellar neighborhood is maintained by cumulative mass distribution, and that distribution now has 142 permanent gaps the local network cannot redistribute load across. Remove enough nodes and the architecture does not weaken proportionally, it destabilizes nonlinearly. The VASCO corridor has already removed 142 confirmed stellar masses from the grid ahead of our boundary. The threshold for nonlinear destabilization at our local stellar density is estimated between 90 and 150 removed masses. The corridor crossed the lower bound before the paper was submitted. No correction window. The system does not wait. The process leaves no advanced telemetry. No decaying signal preceding the absence. No gravitational wave front arriving before deletion completes. Standard gravitational wave propagation travels at the speed of light, detectable, mappable. The structural failure registered across 142 coordinates left nothing measurable before execution. The void does not announce itself. Each case shows full completion, not progression, not partial fade. The deletion executes and the coordinate closes. What detection array provides actionable warning against a process that leaves no acoustic signature, no precursor signal, no measurable precondition before execution completes? The orbital mechanics of every body inside our solar perimeter depend on gravitational constants derived from a stellar neighborhood now 142 masses lighter than those constants assumed. The models do not know that yet. The corridor does not require our acknowledgement. The deletion executes on coordinates. We occupy coordinates. The system does not distinguish between observed and observer. The archive contains no record of a coordinate being skipped. The VASCO algorithm returned 142 confirmed absences, but that is the verified subset. Cases where 1950 parallax data was sufficient to rule out every alternative. The unconfirmed subset coordinates where plate quality was insufficient for full parallax validation, but the 2019 return was nonetheless sterile void, adds several hundred additional cases. The published paper lists 100 confirmed. The internal dataset contained 142 verified and 300 flagged. The VASCO archive is larger than the VASCO publication. The deletion is further along than the public record shows, and the internal dataset has not been updated since the servers were decommissioned. The last entry is the last entry. The leading edge continues advancing. In the void ahead of the Orion Arms trailing boundary, stellar masses are compressed without thermodynamic discharge, the silence of deletion in progress. Simultaneously, the physical drives containing the unpublished angular analysis were transferred to a facility with no external network access. The servers that processed the full 600 million coordinate dataset were decommissioned 8 months after submission, hardware destruction logged as routine retirement. The classified cartographic overlay mapping the corridors bearing against the Orion arm was printed once, on physical medium, in a room with no recording equipment. That document's location is not in any accessible filing system. The void advances. The record shrinks. Both processes run concurrently. The forensic file now contains a direction, a confirmed proximity, a destabilization threshold already crossed, and an archive demonstrably larger than its public version. What remains open is not whether the process is real. The question that data cannot answer is whether the leading edge advances at a rate placing our coordinates inside the confirmed execution window within a timeframe any current instrument detects before completion. In the comments, type erased if you understand the VASCO deletion corridor is a geometric process advancing through the stellar grid without signal, without mechanism, and without the capacity to register our position as different from any coordinate it has already closed. Type targeted if you confirm the suppressed angular clustering, the asymmetric density gradient, and the unpublished cartographic overlay constitute forensic evidence that the bearing was not random, that our coordinates were inside the calculated corridor before the first absence was logged in 1950. The system is logging all responses. Leave your mark before the screen goes dark.